Welcome back everyone. Thank you to all of you who responded to the student review. So, some of you have already been asking, I will issue an anticipatory apology. The test will probably take a while to mark. This week and next I have other assignments and tests in my other classes. So it will take a bit more time. So far, pretty similar grades to last time. So this marks the kind of halfway point of the semester. So the first half, philosophy of science. We're now entering the philosophy of mind half. Now, if you didn't do as well in the first half, or if you found some of the debates kind of boring and technical, don't prejudge the second half. It's still philosophy, but a lot of the questions in this second half are probably things many of you have thought about already. These are the kinds of questions that you can even get kids to think about. Like, for example, how many of you at some point have had the thought, how do I know whether other people's experience of blue is the same as my blue? Right. Even young kids wind up having thoughts kind of like that. So that's a classic example of a philosophy of mind question. So all the way back on, the first real day, I distinguished the three main areas of philosophy: epistemology, which is about knowledge; metaphysics, which is about what's real, what's the nature of reality; and value, sometimes called axiology. So that would include things like ethics and aesthetics. So what's good, beautiful, obligatory, stuff like that. So value we don't get into really at all in this course, although in the summer I am teaching moral psychology, which we'll get into those kinds of debates. By the way, it's already full, so it filled up very fast, so that's good, because it's the first time it's been offered here. The first half of the course, more related to epistemology, right? Philosophy of science is more within the purview of epistemology, although the scientific realism debate, I guess, would count as a kind of metaphysical question. This second half of the course is basically all metaphysics. As I mentioned also on that first day, the term psychology breaks down into psyche, which means soul or mind, and logos, which means discourse or word or study of. So psychologists study the mind, or say we study the mind. What is the mind? That's really the topic of all of the rest of this semester. It will go by a little bit faster because the review days are not during normal class time. I've booked this room for separate time, so if you want to come for a test review day, it'll still be filmed and put into the playlist, but it'll be on a different time. So it's 2 weeks, then test, 2 weeks, and then a test. This is the book that we're using. I will note that the bookstore has now changed to having the 5th edition, which is red. So if you buy it last minute, it'll be a different edition. And to those of you who are watching this way in the future, it'll be a physical red copy in the bookstore. Hello. But I'll still be teaching from this. The difference is chapter 8 in this edition is about Donald Davidson, someone I don't care at all about. They've changed that now to have extra AI content, but the other stuff is all in the same order. So if you're curious about some extra AI stuff, I'm not going to be covering that chapter, but maybe a point of curiosity.
Like AI created content?
Actually, the final page or so is AI created. It just says, this is what ChatGPT has to say about this chapter. Wow. But most of it, no, is just about some of the advancements in AI. I'll be gesturing at some of them, but the only AI stuff that I'll be talking about is from the 4th edition. Okay, let's get started on the book. So it starts off the chapter 1 with a classic thought. Again, this is something that many of you have probably heard as kids and thought about. Right? If a tree falls down in the forest when no one is listening, does it make a sound? Well, actually, someone says yes. So there's a joke version of this that was popular in my friend group, which is, if a man says something in the forest and there's no woman around to correct him, is he still wrong? That was the version. So someone always says, yes, of course. But, okay, leave that aside. But what you're inclined to say when you reflect on the tree falling version is, what is there if no one's listening is disturbances in the air. Right? There's still sound waves, that's still there, but there's no subjective experience of the sound. And that's a classic way of talking about this. There's a division or distinction between physical features of the world and how those features are experienced by us. There's a closely related distinction, going back to, I believe, John Locke. Okay, this one's better. Between primary qualities and secondary qualities. So, to a first pass, primary qualities are properties of an object that are intrinsic to the object. In other words, the object has those properties whether anyone is looking at the object or not. So, classic examples for someone like Locke are going to be things like shape, right? The fact that an object is a cube is true whether or not anyone is looking at it. We could add things like the object's weight or mass, how fast it's moving. Things like that are true of the object whether or not we're looking at it. Whereas secondary qualities relate to the types of experiences that the object tends to produce in us. So when I was talking about a somewhat different distinction, although it's related, I used the example of taste. Right? Taste is a secondary quality. The fact that chocolate ice cream tastes good really just means the object tends to produce a certain kind of taste experience in me.
I don't like chocolate ice cream.
Wow. Okay. So not for you. Okay, here's one that is true for hopefully everyone, unless you're severely colorblind. For Locke, color is also a secondary quality, right? Redness is not an intrinsic feature of the marker. To say this is red is really to say this. So let's say it was an apple. There's the apple. And let's actually pretend it's a green apple. So I'll make my point later. So it's a green apple. It tends to cause certain wavelengths of light to bounce off of it. Now, the fact that the apple tends to produce certain wavelengths or reflect certain wavelengths, that's a primary quality, right? That's true of the object whether or not anyone's looking at it. Philosophers call that reflectance profiles. The reflectance profile of the apple is a primary quality. And what you want to say is, well, when it hits the eye of a normal observer with a normal brain and normal eye, they have, and it's controversial how best to state this, but something like, a green experience. So upon reflection, we want to say the redness or the greenness or whatever is not really in the apple, it's in my mind. It's a feature of how I respond to the apple. Okay, so we've avoided the issue of, saying that the redness or greenness is in the apple because atoms aren't colored, and it's difficult to make sense of what it would even mean for the apple to have that color. But now, okay, we say that it's a feature of our experience. Where the heck is this greenness? If you open up the brain and look at it, there's not like a green image in there. It's just a bunch of wet meat, right? It's a bunch of neurons sending signals to each other. Yes?
Well, I was gonna say, doesn't it come from, like your eyeballs and like those cones and receptors and stuff, and how you have different colors, and then the colors mix together and it creates colors?
No, of course. So absolutely correct. The light stimulates the rods and cones.
Yeah.
The rods and cones send signals to the occipital cortex.
Yes.
But at no point is there anything green, or at least not if you look at it from the outside. If you look at the brain from the outside, there's not like a green thing in there. So,
No.
but I know there's green. I look at the apple, there's something green. Where the hell is this? And that really is the core of the problem that this book is about, right? What's the relationship between the psychological experience of these kinds of qualities, like colors, pains, and so on, and the physical workings of the brain? To gesture at some related problems, I'm going to show a video of someone we've already seen. This is a physicist. I showed a video of him earlier talking about quantum physics. Here I'm going to show a video of him talking about some issues related to, the big word, of course, is consciousness. Right?
What is consciousness?
So what is consciousness? So of course, that's part of what's contentious. I think it was you who asked on the first day of class, what is consciousness? So of course, part of what's contentious is how best to define this, but broadly speaking, subjective experience of events, both inside and outside of yourself. And there's a whole host of related issues, and Russell Standard here is going to gesture at some of them. And what I want you to notice is, this is a very smart person, this is a theoretical physicist, and just notice how much of a mess this video is. Okay, so a number of the issues he gestures at there we'll be coming back to. For example, in passing, he talks about the idea that there are two separate things, a mind and a brain, and they're interacting. That's, of course, Descartes' view, which was part of the readings for today. So, this question is within the purview of philosophy, especially according to the definition given by Sellers. Is the name Wilfrid Sellers in the key terms? Okay, so I'll just mention this in passing. So the definition of philosophy I gave back at the beginning of the course is it's asking questions past the point at which it's normally appropriate to do so. Sellers' definition, which is also quite nice, is philosophy is concerned with how things, in the broadest sense, hang together in the broadest sense. So, different disciplines speak of different sorts of things, right? So in physics, it's quantum fields, charge, mass. Biologists speak of neurons, action potentials. And psychologists speak of beliefs, desires, and perceptions, and things like that. So, but in the broadest sense of the term things, how does it all hang together? That's one way of defining philosophy. So what's the relationship between these mental things and physical processes? Now, many scientists are very contemptuous of philosophy. They say that, philosophy is a bunch of rubbish and you shouldn't engage in it. But look, scientists will have background philosophical assumptions when they do their work. And basically you can do it well or you can do it poorly. And to make that point, I have another video from Daniel Dennett, who's one of the main characters in this second half of the semester, talking about how there's no such thing as philosophy-free science. We all have background assumptions of this sort, and what philosophy enables you to do, at least good philosophy, is to analyze those background assumptions when formulating your hypotheses and your questions. Okay, so Dennett actually is the subject of an entire chapter, so we're not going to get into everything he said there, but there's some connection to this picture I drew here. One of Dennett's most famous arguments is that there's something wrong or something misleading about thinking about consciousness in this way. It's very, as he says, tempting to think there's a kind of inner movie in your head, a kind of inner show with qualities and colors and so on. Dennett thinks he has a different way of thinking about consciousness, which I won't get into right now, but the more important thing I want you to take away from that video is, as I said earlier, there's no such thing as entirely philosophy-free science. So this term, I'm sure, is in the key terms, cognitive science. This is a growing area. Now, Heil is, I think, meaner to cognitive science than I would have been, but I'll say what it is. So cognitive science is, by definition, an interdisciplinary field. So SFU has a program in cognitive science. UBC, I think it's called cognitive systems, but same basic idea. A bachelor's degree in cognitive science involves taking some psychology, some philosophy, usually some computer science or AI type courses, maybe some linguistics and anthropology. So it's basically the space where those types of disciplines overlap. You bring multiple tools to the study of how the mind works.
Is cognitive science different from behavioral neuroscience?
Yeah, technically, I mean, a behavioral neuroscience course could easily be part of a cognitive science education. I would say the term cognitive science is broader, that it includes more. So a degree in behavioral neuroscience would not have, for example, philosophy requirements, whereas this would. Now, one debate in the field is the extent to which empirical evidence is relevant to philosophy of mind debates. So some people in the field think at least many issues in philosophy of mind are entirely separate from scientific questions about psychology or neuroscience, right? It's really a priori matter. Whereas someone like Dennett, for example, thinks that philosophy of mind should be very closely connected with empirical findings from psychology, neuroscience, and so on. Chapter 1 then concludes with a brief summary of the upcoming chapters. I'll go ahead and go through that. If it gives you a bit of a headache, don't worry too much about all of it now, but it might be nice to have a little map of what's to come. So I'll go through that briefly, and then we'll zoom in on chapters 2 and 3, which are about Descartes' dualism, and then some views in the immediate aftermath of Descartes that I've labeled the Post-Cartesian views. So the first view that we'll be seeing later today is Descartes' mind-body dualism. So earlier I had that picture of the dude with the brain and the brain states, and then the mental experience. So Descartes' view is, well, these seem different, right? The brain, body, physical things, and psychological experience. Well, maybe they are two different things, right? There's the body, made of atoms or whatever the physicists say matter is made of, and then there's the mind or soul, and the two causally interact. This is, of course, familiar from various religious traditions, though not all. Many religious traditions have this conception, in part because if the mind or soul is separate from the body, then it can survive the death of your body, right? If you want an afterlife, it's convenient if you got the soul, because then when you get hit by a bus, the brain's all messed up, well, the soul can live on. I once got a complaint about making a comment about being hit by a bus. If any of your relatives were hit by a bus, I'm very sorry, but I'm just making the point of it. Another view, which is the first materialist view that we'll look at, is behaviorism. Specifically philosophical behaviorism. The chapter gestures at psychological behaviorism as well. I think I said back on the first class that there's a distinction here where psychological behaviorism is the research program or paradigm, if you want to use the Kuhnian phrase, that you learned about back in intro. Philosophical behaviorism is the view that mental states are real, beliefs and desires and so on, but they are just roundabout ways of talking about behavior. Or you could say behavioral dispositions, right? The kinds of behavior that you are disposed to do. So two big names associated with behaviorism, although neither of them liked the term behaviorism. Very few people will admit to being behaviorists. So these two, their views are more nuanced, but they're at least talked about in that chapter, are Ryle and Wittgenstein. So those are probably the two biggest guns in that chapter. The next view, mind-brain identity theory, which if you take in neuroscience classes, psych professors who teach those classes tend to speak in these terms. This is the view that mental states are brain states. Full stop. So, nice and simple. What's pain? It's a particular state of your brain. What's that red experience? It's activation in the visual cortex and maybe some other places, but there's no soul, no magic. Mental states are brain states. Another view, now this view is still a materialist view, but so it overlaps, there's some commonalities with mind-brain identity theory, but there's some important differences, is functionalism. Dennett has some nuance, but Dennett, broadly speaking, would be in this family of views. Functionalism is the view that mental states are defined in terms of what they do, in terms of their causal or functional role. So, obviously this is oversimplified, but a state like pain, what is it to be in pain? Well, for a functionalist, the state has various effects. So, for example, it will cause you to have the belief that your body has been damaged. Right? It causes you to represent that there's been damage to your knee or whatever it is. It will cause you to have the desire that the state stop. Right? Whatever the thing is. So if you're touching the hot stove, you will desire to move away from the thing causing the state. These in turn will affect your behavior, right? Cause you to move away from the hot stove. It will cause you also to form certain memories, right? So you have now an association that, okay, in the future I am not going to touch that hot stove again, so that could affect future behavior. It's all these, and what the functionalist says is, once you've described all the effects that a particular state has, you're done. There's not magic extra stuff left over. This chapter, and actually the chapter right after it, which zooms in on a particular kind of functionalism, this view is very relevant to modern debates about AI. If you adopt a functionalist perspective, at least the most natural interpretation of functionalism would lead to the conclusion that AI could be conscious, at least, maybe not now, but at least potentially. Because if you make a physical state, like a computer, robot, whatever, that has the same causal profile, then that state is conscious. There's nothing magic about meat, as long as the silicon device has the same profile of effects, then it is also conscious. Yes, so, and then, I've already mentioned Dennett a few times, so Dennett, who, by the way, I might mention this later if I forget that I said it now. When I first taught this course, or a very similar course at the University of Alberta, I was practicing for a lecture on Dennett, and then he died either the day I did it or the day after. Now, I'm not one for, spooky stuff, but it's kind of a funny coincidence. So this section says Dennett is the hero, in parentheses, or the villain of chapter 9. So Dennett's a very divisive figure. Dennett, broadly speaking, counts as a functionalist, and he has many ideas that we'll talk about in that chapter. I'll just mention one, which is the title of the Dennett chapter, which is the intentional stance. And I'll contrast this with the physical stance. Again, you don't have to worry about all the details here, but I'm just giving kind of a roadmap of what's to come. So Dennett thinks these are two different ways of approaching a physical system. So you have a physical system, and you want to predict what the system will do next. Adopting the physical stance means I'm going to pay attention to all of the physical information about this system. So its mass, its activity, if it's the brain, you could be looking at activity in the brain. But you're looking at the kinds of quantities described by the physical sciences. The intentional stance is a way to make still very accurate predictions, but with much less information. The intentional stance means I treat a system as if it is an agent or a person that has beliefs and desires. So, for example, if it's a human being, if I adopt the physical stance, that means I scan every neuron in their brain and all the physical events in the surrounding environment, and I use that to predict what they're going to do next. Very, very hard to do. Right? You need a lot of information. If by so let's say what I'm trying to predict is, let's say there's a donut here, and the prediction is, will this person eat the donut? Physical stance, I have to scan every neuron to figure it out. Intentional stance, all I have to know really is, do they know the donut's there, and do they want to eat it? Maybe some other stuff, but that's the kind of information I get. Information about them as a person. And I can make an accurate prediction on the basis of that much smaller amount of information. And Dennett says, actually, you can use this even for certain simple computer systems. Think like a thermostat, right? You want to predict what a thermostat's going to do. You could scan every transistor in the thermostat to figure out what it's going to do, or you can treat it as a kind of agent that has a single belief and a single desire. Its belief, so to speak, is what is the temperature in the room right now, and its desire is to get it to whatever is put in. And you can predict what it's going to do with, again, a much smaller amount of information. So lots more to say about Dennett, but that's good enough for our purposes. Then, in the last two chapters of the course, we will get to the bullseye, the issue that the Russell Standard video was kind of gesturing at, and the issue I was gesturing at earlier, which is the issue of consciousness. So the main character of the last lecture will be David Chalmers, who is sort of Dennett's arch enemy, or at least was when Dennett was alive. I mean, they were on good terms, but their papers were always sort of at cross purposes. As we will see, Chalmers distinguishes between the easy problems and the hard problem. So the easy problems relate to functioning and behavior. So the easy problems of consciousness, they're not easy in the sense that, you can do it in an afternoon. They're still difficult, but they are solvable by the standard methods of science. So take pain. You want to solve the easy problems related to pain? Okay, I touch the hot stove, nociceptors in my skin send signals up to the spine and then to the thalamus. They're redirected to different parts of the cortex, especially the somatosensory cortex. There's activity in the anterior cingulate. Messages then go to my motor centers. I walk away from it. Although actually the hand retraction is initiated by the spine, but me walking away from it, initiated by the motor cortex. there's memories in hippocampus, blah, blah, blah. You all are psych majors, you could add some details of your own. There's a lot of work to do, but we know what we're doing, right? We just described the mechanisms involved in retraction, remembering to not do it again, and so on. The hard problem is, why is any of that functioning and activity and behavior associated with what it feels like to be in pain? It seems like there's something extra. It's not just that I pull my hand away and go, ow, shit, that hurts, and don't touch it again. And it's hard to put into words, but there's what the pain feels like. And it's hard to see how a description of a bunch of, basically sodium and potassium moving through voltage gates is going to explain why pain feels like something. So, and that's the bullseye of philosophy of mind. That's why I think it's Tom Nagel who says, without consciousness, philosophy of mind seems sort of boring and easy enough. With the hard problem of consciousness, it seems impossible. So that'll be the main subject of the last lecture. Chalmers, he's actually a good Bayesian. He divides his credences. He says that around 40% of his credence is for some form of dualism. Around 40% he gives to panpsychism, which is the view that everything is conscious. All matter has a little bit of consciousness, which may seem crazy, but I think Chalmers is right about at least one thing, which is that every view about consciousness is at least a little bit crazy. Chalmers says he does give a little bit of credence to Dennett. He says maybe 10% I give to, maybe Dennett is right. So as probably you all remember, your in-class essay for test 4 will be about Dennett versus Chalmers. Same basic structure as the Popper-Kuhn paper, just about those two. Okay, so as I say, if this first chapter gave you a bit of a headache with me running through everything, that bit, don't worry about for test 2, but it's nice to have kind of a roadmap. Any questions before we move on to René Descartes?
For a definition for interactionists.
Good. So interactionist is the view that the mind and the brain causally interact, so they can affect each other.
Makes sense.
So René Descartes, who we've already seen, and I didn't know this at first when I was studying philosophy, but Descartes is the conventional way of dividing pre-modern and modern philosophy, or medieval and what's sometimes called early modern philosophy. He's maybe most famous for what we saw earlier, the I think, therefore I am. He thought that was the one thing he could know for sure, is I at least know that I'm thinking. As we'll see, he actually uses that to argue for dualism. I already mentioned, or not I mentioned, the video mentioned that this is not an especially popular view these days, but I learned something recently. How many of you have had David Wolf, the professor? So, a great prof. I think I mentioned he, back in the day, wrote me a reference letter for grad school. I recently found out he came out of the closet. He is in fact a dualist.
I thought you were going to say he was gay. I was like, what? Why are you outing?
Wow. That's a joke, yeah.
No, he outed himself in public, so it was okay. It was at a philosophy
I was
club
like,
meeting.
what?
He made a joke. I won't tell you the joke he made, but no, it's funny because he what's sorry?
Not appropriate? Or
Yeah, probably not. So,
Okay, we already reviewed him,
but that's
The reviews are already in.
but I'm still on probation until I think the end of the summer. He's not religious. He's an atheist, but he's so moved by the hard problem that he is in fact a dualist. So Descartes, more specifically, is what's called a substance dualist. Meaning the mind and brain are two different kinds of things. There's another view, which I don't think is in the key term, so don't worry about it, but property dualism, which says there's only one kind of thing, but it has more than one property. Just that's why the modifier substance is here. So there's your brain, and then now it's tough to draw because, of course, for Descartes, the mind doesn't have a spatial location. It has no physical properties at all, but, some soulish thing where the beliefs, the thoughts, the pains, etc. are. And as I mentioned in response to a question, Descartes is also an interactionist, which means these two causally interact. The mind can affect the body, and the body can affect the mind. So what are some differences? So here's one crucial difference, and actually it relates to the I think, therefore I am thing. So go back to Descartes' doubting. Right? He asks himself, what can I know for sure? Well, I don't know if I'm really in this room right now. I could be hallucinating. I could be having a very vivid dream. And further, I might not have a body. I think I have a body, but maybe I am a brain in a vat, right, that's being fed signals. Or for that matter, I could, as far as I can see, be an immaterial soul and nothing else. I could just be a soul dreaming that I have this physical existence. So I can know for sure that I have a mind, because I know that I'm thinking, but I can't know for sure that I have a body.
Stab yourself.
That's just an experience of pain that I have in my mind. I mean, I'm playing Descartes' advocate.
Cut your head off.
See, that would be a good way, but then if materialism is true, I won't
Was
find
he
out.
alive? Like, when was he like alive during like the witch trials? Like stuff like this.
He would have been pre-witch trials. He's 1500s. So,
Oh, this was a long time.
Yeah, a long time ago. So Descartes is 1500s.
Gotcha.
But it's good to clear up. So this connects to the first kind of property that's true of the mind but isn't true of the body, which is incorrigibility, or the property of being incorrigible. Oh, actually, the book goes in a different. Actually, I'll go with the order of the book. The other one is transparency.
So meaning of incorrigibility?
So I'll do transparency first. So transparency means if you are in a mental state, you know that you are in one. So post-Freudian psychologists generally don't accept this. For Descartes, there's no such thing as a mental state that you are unaware of. For him, it's almost a matter of definition. If it's a mental state, it's something you are consciously aware of.
Well, are we talking about like just if you're a normal person? Like, what if you're just someone that's like, like you have like some disability and like you're actually not consciously, or we're talking about like normal.
If you have no conscious states at all, I guess Descartes' going to say the mind is not awake, is not active, or is not working properly.
Like when you're like a vegetable or something.
Maybe there is no mind, or maybe it's going off to the afterlife and the body's here.
Yeah, I do get the sense that a lot of this discussion kind of assumes like atypical mental states, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you mean assumes typical mental states?
Yes, yeah, sorry.
Yes, no, so that is an objection you could make. Maybe Chalmers is closer to Descartes, so you could draw connections or objections in the psych section on those grounds. Incorrigibility, to get to that one, this is closely related to a term like infallible. The idea here would be, you can't be wrong about your own mental states. Someone was asking me about this in office hours. It's a very intuitive idea. Now, it's actually one I don't accept, but the idea here would be, if you sincerely believe that you're in pain, you are in pain. You can't be wrong about your own pain or about your own experience. So it's a very common view. There's definitely a very strong intuition there, and serious people still argue for it. And for Descartes, it's essential. If you believe you're in a given state, you are in that state. Now, neither of these seem to be true about bodily or physical states. Because like I said, I can't even really be sure that I have a body at all. But I can be sure I have mental states. Now, is the term Leibniz's law in the key terms?
Yes, but
Okay.
it's in chapter 2, and it's also in, I believe, chapter 12.
I think it was.
Yeah, I think it definitely comes up more than once. So I'll go ahead and say it. I'll annoy you with it again later.
Find it, yeah.
Just let us know. If you use it on one test, are you going to use it on the other test?
This is, I think, a test 1 or test 3. So the first
if,
of the
if
kind of
anything,
thing.
it would be on next test.
Exactly, if anything, yeah. I'm quite confident of that.
You're quite confident. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'll hold it. Just putting it there.
Okay. So
Here you go.
here's Leibniz's
Rather
law.
encourageable.
So if two things are the same, so if A equals B, they must have all of the same properties. So here's a classic example that philosophers talk about, the morning star and the evening star. These are two words we have, but they refer to the same thing. Does anyone know what they refer to?
The suns.
Nope.
Yeah.
Sorry? Venus is correct, yes. So Venus is not really a star, but before we knew about
Yeah,
that kind of thing,
it's like a star.
it's the brightest thing in the morning and the brightest thing in the early evening. And they're in fact the same thing. What that means is everything that's true of the morning star is also true of the evening star. The morning star doesn't have any properties that the evening star doesn't have. But here we have a problem, because there are these properties that seem to be true of the mind that are not true of the body. And here's another one, privateness. Right? The contents of my mind are private. At least they seem to be. It seems to be the case, only I know about my pains and my thoughts and my beliefs and so on. You all have to guess. On the basis of my behavior, you can maybe guess, but only I really know what's going on up here. Whereas that isn't true of physical things. Physical things are public, right? If you want to know what's going on in my brain, you could scan it. If you're a psychopath, you could do other things to get access to see what's going on in my brain, right? Not to be graphic, but the point is, it's public. So, the brain, everything about the brain is public, but my mind is not.
Yes.
If Leibniz's law is right, they can't be the same thing. Because there are properties that one has that the other doesn't. Whoa.
No, because it is. No.
For material things, the main property they have, or attribute means a property without which that thing can't be what it is. So the attribute of material things is extension. Material things are spatially extended. Basically, they take up room. If it takes up room, it's material. So there are various attributes or properties that mental states have that material things don't. So we have a nice, neat argument for dualism.
And minds don't have material extension.
Yeah, that would be an implication of this. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be one of the arguments for dualism, at least not one of the good ones. But it seems pretty clear that material things don't have these. Material things are not private. There's not transparent, incorrigible access, whereas there is, or seems to be, for mind. Yeah.
For Descartes, if the mental state is true to the person, and if somebody was in a state of psychosis or mania, or like experiencing grandiosity, that was, fundamentally not true with this. But Descartes wasn't necessarily he didn't necessarily, it wasn't a relevant, didn't believe in relativism.
No, he wouldn't be a relativist. So good. So this is a good example maybe to bring this out. So suppose I don't know, believe I'm the king of England or something. So I have access to I really do believe that. If I believe that, I believe it. He's not saying if you believe it, therefore it's true in the world, but your access to the contents of your own mental states, that's incorrigible. So if I sincerely report that I'm in pain, no one can tell me I'm wrong about being in pain. Now again, you don't have to agree. You could. There are, and in fact, I think I gestured, I don't agree with that. But there's a very strong intuition there that, at least within the space of my own mind, I am the kind of final authority. Hey, you're shaking your head. Yeah, as I've always said, there's no requirement to believe or not believe anything. You only have to understand what the different views are. Does that help?
It does.
So I'll be a bit more precise here. So I gestured at the term attribute. So objects have properties. Some of those properties are not essential for the thing being what it is. This is an example that Descartes probably wouldn't have loved, but it'll get the right idea across. So let's say I get a chimpanzee in here. Here's a chimpanzee, which I of course would not do because
Why?
Chimpanzees can rip your face off.
What?
In fact, here's just a little bit of.
Have you've heard about the good dude? You know, the lady that raised the chimp.
I would not recommend taking that up as a career. When chimps snap, it goes very badly.
She raised a chimp just because.
No, I mean it's good. I mean I respect.
A friend of hers.
Well, okay, good. That's what I was getting to. So chimps are yes.
What's his name?
Very, very aggressive, very strong. A little aside about that. Circuses in the U.S. used to have this event where there was an 85-pound juvenile chimp, not even a fully grown one, and men could get money by wrestling the chimp and pinning it on its shoulders. You got like money for every second you kept it down. They put gloves on and a mask on so that it couldn't rip people's faces off. This is not fully grown, 85 pounds. Big 200-pound guys came in with their girlfriends in the background to impress. No one won.
Yeah.
So chimps are per pound very strong. That has nothing to do with this. So I bring in the chimp. The chimp has a number of properties, like how many hairs does it have, how long are its fingers, and whatever. But those are not part of what it means to be a chimp, those properties. If I shave the chimp, it's still a chimp.
What? No, it's a bald chimp.
It's a bald chimp, but it's still a chimp. Something like how many chromosomes it has is part of what it means to be a chimp. If I go in and alter its DNA, it's not a chimp anymore. Or at least that's, could be contentious, but that's at least a plausible example. So that's what an attribute is. An attribute is a property that is part of what it means to be that thing. So for Descartes, the defining attribute of physical things is extension, right? Spatial extension. As I said earlier, do they take up space or not? The defining attribute of mental things is thinking. Okay, I'm going to build on this to gesture at the issue of free will, but I think that's probably a natural place for a break. So let's come back at 5:05. Okay, everyone, let's get back into it. So, next I'm going to use our discussion to get at free will a little bit, which some of you were discussing during the break. So let's take a specific example of a conscious experience. So, I experience pain. In fact, let's say someone hits me in the knee with a bat. Okay, so signals go up into my brain. So there's some brain state. And then this is transmitted to the soul, which I'll make a thought bubble, and you feel the pain. Now, for whatever it's worth, no dualist today believes this, but Descartes believed, is it in the book? there's a part of the brain that transmits signals.
The pineal gland.
The pineal gland. And so the pineal gland, which by the way, the reason he thought that is a lot of the brain is bilateral. There's like one half here, one half here. Pineal gland's right in the middle with just one thing. So
Driver's seat kind of thing.
yeah, exactly. So that was his conjecture, and no dualist believes that today. It's physically, completely implausible. I think the pineal gland's mainly involved in sleep, if I remember it correctly. And then maybe you can make some kind of decision, right? The mind decides, do I hit this guy back or not? And that in turn can feed signals back and generate a new brain state. So I will say up front, this issue of causal interaction is the biggest source of issues for Cartesian dualism. Because remember all that we've said about what these states are like, right? They have no spatial location, they have no physical properties. Well, how can these invisible, locationless, spaceless things affect the brain? I'll come back to that later. But one upside of a dualist picture is it may be a means of getting free will back into the picture. So here I'm going to talk a bit about the issue of free will and determinism. So determinism, which is commonly thought to follow from a materialist or physicalist picture of the world, determinism is the thesis that everything that happens is predetermined by prior states. So, look, if you're a physicalist or a materialist, so everything is physical stuff, the world is a bunch of atoms or quantum fields or whatever it is, but there are equations that tell us how those physical states evolve over time. And this includes the physical states that make up our brains and our bodies. So if you had enough information, and you knew where all the atoms were and all the sodium channels were doing and all of that, you could predict what someone will do next. And there doesn't seem to be, in that picture of the world, room for at least a certain conception of free will. If free will means the ability to do whatever you want in a way that's unconstrained by prior states, it's not clear that's compatible with a deterministic picture of the world. Now, it gets complicated, of course, because at the level of quantum physics, it's not clear that determinism is true. There are some deterministic interpretations of quantum physics and some indeterministic ones. But even there, even if it's indeterministic, the probabilities are still set in advance in equations. So I wish there was a better term for this, but in my moral psych class, I sometimes talk about law of natureism, a term I made up, meaning where whether it's probabilistic or deterministic, everything that happens is set by the laws of physics or the laws of nature. And that, again, seems to be a problem if you have a certain conception of free will. But if you're a dualist, you can say, yes, the physical states normally are deterministic, described by laws of nature, but the mind is not governed by the laws of nature. It's this invisible soul thing, so it can introduce new effects, and the soul therefore can be free to decide what it wants, and then can introduce new effects. Some of you are scratching your head, so yes, it's a bit of a strange view, but it's one way of saving an old-fashioned notion of free will.
Question.
Yep.
So your brain state diagram up there.
Yep.
What year were they discussing this? Is this a long time ago?
So Descartes, I don't know if he
this
literally.
This is all Descartes.
Yeah, so we're still talking about
Okay.
Descartes' view. Now, there are not very many interactionist dualists around. Most of the ones who still are around are religious philosophers of one sort or another. There are some dualists left. Most of them will not be this type of
Okay,
dualist.
because I'm in this way, once you look at brain scans, or you make someone have pain and you see where in the brain. So obviously this was before they knew what the brain.
Yes, it's definitely before we had much. I mean, we knew some things, but we knew very little. I mean, Descartes thought the pineal gland was the gateway to the soul, which like there's no way that's right. Now look, I mean, we don't have a complete mapping of every neuron of the brain, so we can't rule this out for sure.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an uncomfortable position now, given how much we know about the brain. Which
I just wanted to make sure that this was like some old stuff and not like
make sure it's
something that people are still,
I mean, some people still think it, but yeah, go ahead.
If I may, could you provide like sort of a straightforward def for quantum theory, or quantum physics?
Okay, so is that in the key?
Quite long.
Is it in the key terms?
Yeah.
So quantum physics is just. I mean,
It was like paragraphs.
Actually, I'll come back to that later, actually, because it's what I gesture at now is not really the main thing, but
Since you brought it up.
yeah, I'll come back to it later. Is the term compatibilism in there?
No.
No. Okay. I'll say this briefly. No, if it's not there. Just on the issue of free will, this will come up again in a later chapter. There are sort of three main views you can have on free will. Actually, I'll probably need that to be bigger. So the first question you have to answer is determinism true or not? So in other words, is it the case that everything that happens is predetermined by the laws of physics? So yes. No. And the other issue is, do we have free will?
Yes.
Yes or no. So the view according to which determinism is true and that rules out free will is sometimes called hard determinism, or sometimes incompatibilist determinism. I believe I'll come back to this in the Dennett chapter, so don't have to worry about it much right now. The view according to which we do have free will, and it's a kind of magical kind of free will, is sometimes called libertarian free will. So we have free will, and we are so free that we are not constrained by prior physical states. So that's very much the view that someone like Descartes would have. Right? The soul is free to do whatever it wants, and it's not constrained by physical states. The correct view, my view, is compatibilism, which is the view that we have free will of a certain sort, but it's compatible with determinism being true. So it's sort of a watered down notion of free will in which, look, we can decide to do what we want, we can deliberate about our actions and so on, but not in a way that's incompatible with determinism. Yes, my desires and deliberations are ultimately brain states, and a perfect computer that knew where all the atoms were in my brain could predict what I will decide next.
No.
But who cares?
Not with me.
I can do what I want. I think about it, I decide to do what I want, that's free enough. So we'll return to that debate in the Dennett chapter. So as I said earlier, the biggest issue for Cartesian dualism is the issue of mind-brain interaction. And there's a famous princess of the time, so as I'm sure you all know, it's the 1500s. So, women were not allowed to do as much as men were allowed to do. So there weren't a lot of female philosophers, but Elizabeth of Bohemia had a lot of philosophical interest. And I believe what was going on is Descartes was corresponding with her for money. I think that's why they were corresponding, but there's a number of letters going back and forth. Descartes was defending his dualist view of the mind, and Elizabeth pressed him on this repeatedly, and the kind of consensus among philosophers is that Elizabeth got the better of Descartes. And I'll show a video of Sean Carroll talking about this issue and their debates. Okay, so what Carroll is getting at there is one of the key terms, which is the idea that the physical world is causally closed. Right? So this is a widely discussed objection to dualism. Many standard assumptions in physics presuppose that the world is causally closed. Think about ideas like conservation of energy, right? New energy is not created or destroyed. Many principles like that. If this interactionist picture of dualism is right, that means that the soul adds new effects into the brain that have no physical cause. It means that if we scan the brain in a detailed enough way, we somewhere should see a situation where the laws of physics say the sodium should, go here or go here, and the laws of physics should be broken in some way, or the expectations we would have based on purely physical processes should be violated. Now, we don't know for sure that's not true, but if the choice is the laws of physics are wrong, or some very complicated philosophical argument is wrong, if you're a betting man, I would argue you should bet with the philosophical argument being wrong. So the only reason I list quantum physics there, I guess it does connect with what I said earlier. Laws of physics like Newton's laws, for example, are deterministic. Given the state of the system at one moment, you can predict with 100% certainty what the state will be in the next moment. Whereas quantum physics is probabilistic. It only gives you the probability of what happens next. At least on standard interpretations, there's different interpretations of quantum physics. Some people have tried to use quantum physics to say dualism isn't necessarily incompatible with the laws of physics. I would say even if the probabilistic readings of quantum physics are right, the behavior of matter is still law-like. I think that's really what's the problem. Don't have to solve that issue now, but that's the only reason quantum physics is brought up. Okay, here are some related issues for dualism. And these draw on things that you'll know about from your psych education, because we do want to make some connections to psych here. I'm going to talk about brain damage.
Sorry, why?
Well, that connects to some things we talked about earlier. And sleep. So, brain damage, as all of you know at this point in your education, for basically any of your favorite psychological faculties, you have the right kind of brain damage, those can be taken away. Right? So, your ability to make memories, your personality, right? Think Phineas Gage, right? Rod through your frontal lobe, your personality can be different. Your capacity to respond emotionally to your loved one, right? All of these are, we know, parts of the brain that are involved, and when those parts are damaged, those faculties are lost. That's surprising if these faculties are properties of the mind, right? If the mind is what feels love, has the emotions, and so on.
Well, what else was?
What, other than the brain, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so if you're a dualist, the soul, which I'm getting a sense you don't believe in, which
I was like,
which is
what
fine,
the fuck
but
else? But the mind is the thing that has the sensors and the receptors and shit like that.
so yeah. So look, at this point in your psych education, although actually,
No,
I think on the
that's
first
just science.
I think on the first day, a majority of you rose your hand and said you were dualist. So it's not a view that psych education necessarily makes you give up, but dualism is at least in tension with a kind of straightforward reading of these kinds of cases. Now, you don't even have to go that extreme. You can also think about sleep, in particular, dreamless sleep. So during the deepest parts of stage 4 sleep, when you're not dreaming, what's going on in your conscious experience? Nothing, right? So you turn brain activity down, not even all that much, and consciousness seems to disappear. It's a very strange view to say that, well, if you turn it down all the way, there's still the soul that has those emotions and memories intact that can go on to the afterlife. So,
Now we're talking about the afterlife.
well, dualism is often taken to be associated with the
Oh
afterlife.
yeah, because they're talking about the soul and everything.
Exactly, the soul being something that, at least in theory, could survive
Yes.
the death of the brain. Now, to be fair, I will show a video of a religious philosopher responding to this line of argument. I want to be fair to the dualist. So actually, this philosopher is still an interactionist dualist. So I'll show this as well. Yeah, good. So it sounds like some of you were thinking in this direction. So that's a nice response to this objection. So what a dualist could say, is if you're watching this later, is that the relationship between the soul or the mind and the brain is like the relationship between a pianist and a piano. If the piano is damaged, the musician can't play the notes anymore. So it is that if the brain is damaged, the soul can't use it to think as well. So there's something to that. All I would say, though, is this is still a problem if you think the soul is the kind of thing that can feel emotions and think in the afterlife, because it's still, that analogy would still commit you to the view that the soul needs the brain in order to think, feel emotions, etc. So I don't think you can get off completely scot-free with that analogy.
And they ignore the whole body, like what about the body? Like you're talking about the brain, but like...
Good, so this is a view that I gesture at in a few places. There are people who argue, so the standard view nowadays in psychology and neuroscience is that the brain is where the action is. But there's a view, have any of you heard of embodied cognition? So it's some of you are nodding a bit. So many people argue now that psychology and neuroscience underemphasize the way in which other bodily reactions are relevant to conscious experience. I'm not going to take a view on that, but that is a legit view that serious people argue for. I was going to say something else. Yes, the other reason I showed that video, though, if you have religious commitments, I don't think it should mean that you have to take one side or the other on these debates, because as Professor Craig says, there are religious materialists. And in fact, I grew up religious. This was the view I had, at least towards the end. I'm not religious anymore, but there are people who think that, and some even argue this is the New Testament view, that the afterlife is bodily resurrection, not going off onto the clouds to be a soul with God.
Like you get resurrected as a new person?
No, so the idea is like in the afterlife, in the final days, we get new bodies. So again, this is not a religious philosophy class, but I just say that to point out that that religious commitments shouldn't mean that you have to take one side or another.
So embodied cognition would be like a gut feeling?
Yeah, a gut feeling. I don't know how far all of them go with this, but for example, one case that's maybe easier to swallow, you think about an emotional state. What reactions that your body has may be relevant to how you think or feel.
There's tremendous communication between your gut and your brain.
Yeah, exactly. So it might be that the pattern of sensitivity that we have to the world crucially depends on bodily states. So no, it's a serious view that I think gives a lot of insight. Yeah.
I will say, I think it's interesting that most of us have rejected mind-body dualism so long ago, but the way that we
maybe almost in this class, though. I think the poll we got a slight majority, but
okay. Well, I'm not a dualist, and I would say that even most common saying medical doctors and stuff, we're going to be like, well, we're not dualists and might veer towards biology and materialism, but the way that we like set society up and we talk about like mental health as being separate from physical health, and so we don't actually include mental health in like healthcare, for instance, like free healthcare. I just always
right. So that there's dualist assumptions that are still left over in a lot of ways. I think that's definitely right. Yeah, that's a good point. I will also mention, last point of the chapter, someone else who's a dualist, who I still can't believe he really was, but he was. I was Karl Popper, which is very unusual given his other commitments. But so no one's perfect. I'm kind of showing my cards there. Okay. Any questions about chapter 2 before we do chapter 3? Which chapter 3 won't take all that long.
Probabilistic laws was also in there. It just ties in with the quantum theory stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. So a law of physics where if you know the state of the system at time 1, you only know the probability of what will happen at time 2.
And I guess braining it fast. What would you want?
Oh, good. Yeah. So just the idea that, and I'll come back to this. Oh, actually, no. I'm going to come back to this right now. I'm supposed to do this now. Glad you asked. So there's what's called the conceivability argument for dualism, which I talked about earlier, but I'll remind us now. So it's possible that I don't have a body, or I could imagine it being the case that I don't have a body. Or you could say, I can't be certain. That's another way of saying it. I can't be certain that I have a body, but I can be certain that I have a mind. So that's one of the arguments for the mind and brain being different, because remember, Leibniz's law, if A and B, this is the bad felt. If A and B are the same, is this the good one? That's a bit better, whatever. If A and B are the same, they have to share all their properties, and it seems like they have different properties. I can be certain of the mind, be certain that I have one, but I can't be certain that I have a body. Okay? Therefore, they are not the same thing.
You just scrap this law and throw it out.
So no, Leibniz's law, I mean, look, nothing is completely uncontroversial in philosophy, but this is pretty close to being uncontroversial.
Okay.
So
Minus the whole mind and brain thing.
that is an option. There's an easier option, though. And this one actually comes from David Wolff. Now, David Wolff, as I mentioned, has now come out of the closet as a dualist, but he thinks, although philosophers are always good at finding problems, even with arguments they like, Wolff, when I took philosophy of mind with him, gave what he and I think is a knockdown argument against this. This is a bit of comedic relief. I will give a slightly modified version of Wolff's analogy. And this is actually a true story that I'm going to use as a kind of knockdown argument. So I feel bad now because I've told a few stories about this brother, and he's always the butt end of the joke.
He's the youngest, right?
He's the youngest of the boys.
Yeah,
So in my family, there are two teams. There is Team Pet and Team Anti-Pet. And the implicit rule has been, if there is a tie between Team Pet and Team No Pet, then there's no pet. Team Pet has to win a majority to get a pet. My dad was Team No Pet, Mom was Team Pet, tie, no pet. I'm born, I was Team No Pet, no pet. My brother, one of them is born, Team Pet, so now it's 2-2, still a tie. Nathan, youngest boy, is Team Very Anti-Pet, so no pet. Finally, my parents got a girl after 4 attempts. She was Team Pet. She's the only daughter.
So she got a pet.
She can make my dad think whatever. So my dad is then Team Pet. So now we got a cat.
Once both parents are Team Pet, then
That's just it. Yeah, and it's a majority. Now it's 4-2. We got a cat. The cat won me over, so I am now Team Pet.
Cats are the best.
Yeah, exactly. The cat seduced me. Now Nathan is still
no pet.
Nathan is still very much Team No Pet. He hates that cat. So we thought it was just one year to give him a Christmas present from the cat. So we emptied. This is going online. So we emptied the contents of the cat's litter box. I'll say it like that, into a gift. Wrapped it up and wrote to Nathan from Luca. So I can still remember him opening it and seeing what it was. So now, of course, there is a connection here. I promise. So here's the box. Okay, and inside the box is
a cat.
The cat poop.
And a new cat.
So this one is really bad. And then here, okay, that's better. Here is Nathan. So Nathan's looking at the box. Well, it's a box. He can't tell what it is. So now he is thinking, I want what's in the box.
I bet.
Right? We normally give good gifts in my family, right? So he believes there's a gift in there. I want what's in the box. Now there's two things. There's what you could say X in the box, right? So whatever is in the box. And there's the cat poop. Now, here's a difference between them. Nathan wants this. He wants what's in the box, but he does not want cat poop.
Yeah, no shit.
Right? So now, you could use this to make an argument. Well, these must be two different things.
No.
There's that which is in the box, and there's the cat poop. Because Nathan has different attitudes or different mental states towards these two. But that's absurd, right? Right? These are the same thing, right? What's in the box is the same as the cat poop. So what does this show? People's attitudes towards things are not properties of those things. Right? I'll say it again. People's attitudes towards things are not properties of those things. So the fact that I feel I can be certain that I have a mind, but I can't be certain I have a body, that's not a property of my mind and body. That's just a property of me, believing things. So now there's some differences in the analogy, but as far as the logic, I think this is pretty close to a knockdown argument, not against dualism, but against this argument for dualism. So the fact that I can be sure I have a mind and can't be sure I have a body, I don't think succeeds in proving dualism. I think you had a hand up. Is that an
Yeah, I
answer?
was just gonna say, like, what if a student got you a gift and it was just their cat's shit? Like, how would you feel,
How would I? Oh, you're trying to make me feel bad for this?
Well, that's like, I don't know, kind of.
I don't know. I mean,
Like,
Nathan did actually engage in revenge for
I was
this.
gonna say, dude, like, I would.
He taped a gift to my door, which was very directly from him.
Was it poo?
I won't say anything.
Oh.
We're on video.
Wow.
Anyways, yeah. So
Moving on.
it's things like this where I feel bad for my mom and sister.
Yeah.
This will be on the
Yeah, that's what I want. Maybe I should edit that part out.
We just got an example.
I just read the last part.
Right, yeah, there we go.
Okay, on to chapter 3.
Yeah, on to chapter 3. Okay. So I'm not going to go through everything here. So as always, let the key terms guide what you focus on. But there's a number of, I think, interesting lessons to learn from what I've called in the syllabus the Post-Cartesians. So the philosophers who came in Descartes' wake and had various alternatives. So the first post-Cartesian view we'll talk about comes from Leibniz. So Leibniz, just as an interesting aside, invented calculus around the same time that Newton did. They seem to have come up with it independently. This often happens in the history of disciplines. There are moments where certain ideas are sort of ready to be discovered. Do any of you know, there's another famous example of this.
DNA.
DNA is the same researchers. It was Darwin and Wallace. They came up with natural selection around the same time, as far as we can see independently. So what was his view? So he saw that the issue of the mind and brain interacting was a real problem. So what he said is, okay, fine, they don't interact. So his view is called psychological parallelism. So there's mind state 1. Or actually, no, sorry, I should make this bubbly. Or like a thought bubble. So here's the mental state. So for example, it might be like pain. So someone hits me in the knee with the baseball bat, I feel the pain, that's in the mind. There's the mind's state 2, which might be I feel the urge to hit that person back. But then independently, there's the body's state 1, so S1, and the body's next state. So the initial bodily state with like the excitation of my spine and my anterior cingulate, that's the first state. At the exact same time, there's the state of my mind, which is feeling the pain. In the next moment, there's my body, my brain sending signals to my hand to punch, whatever. And there's my mental state of the felt urge or felt decision to do that. But there's no arrows here to here or here to here. They run in parallel. So my conscious decisions, my conscious pains, do not affect my brain or body's states. And you might ask, well then, isn't it a giant coincidence that they are always perfectly correlated? Because Leibniz concedes these are always correlated. Whenever I feel the felt urge to do it, my body in fact does that. Here's where Leibniz introduces God. So he says, well, God has set it up so they are always perfectly correlated. That's convenient. So yes, this is of course, I would say, a problem. But you might ask why I bring this up. Someone asked in an earlier chapter what Wundt's view was. I actually didn't know this, but I Googled it. He rejected Cartesian dualism, but he was a psychological parallel person. So this was, in fact, Wundt's view. Not the God part, but the idea that these are separate causal tracks that run in parallel was, in fact, Wundt's view. And this is still a kind of dualism, just not the Cartesian variety. Okay, next. This comes from a French philosopher, Malebranche, which is called occasionalism. Occasionalism is the view that there's only one kind of causal power, which is God's.
Okay. Yeah, this is not. Sorry.
So there are events in the world, whether they're mental events, physical events, doesn't matter. The world is kind of like a comic book. There's moment 1, moment 2, moment 3, and this is not real. Event 1 doesn't cause event 2.
It just happened.
They just happen, and all events are caused by God.
Oh, yes.
And they are made so they're predictions you can make about what will happen next, right? When I push something, it moves. But what makes it move is, in fact, God. Now, again, some of you are kind of laughing about this, but
Sorry.
the reason I bring it up, there is, I should say, so it's called occasionalism.
You told.
The reason it's called that is events in the world are occasions for God to exert his causal powers. They're mere occasions. They don't have any causal powers, only God does. Now, this is actually a precursor to what is now one of the most popular views of causation, which is David Hume's. David Hume looked at this and said, Malebranche is on the right track, but just, yes, exactly,
Yeah, okay,
but God doesn't exist. So Hume's view is that, in fact, there are no causal connections. At least not of the sort we ordinarily think about. Remember from earlier chapters that Hume is an empiricist, so all that we can know about is what we directly observe. And what I'm going to say might surprise you, but if you pay attention, you'll see that Hume is right about this. We never observe causation.
No.
All we observe is an event, followed by another event, followed by another event. And, we observe that certain events reliably come before other events. But when one ball hits another and the other ball moves away, we don't see the causation. So Hume's view is that this is all there is. There's a series of events, and that's it.
Yeah.
Now there's some debate about how best to interpret Hume, but at least to a first pass, that's Hume's view.
That makes sense.
I'm glad.
I'm glad you found your
Makes sense.
So dualism, so let's divide it up like this. So there's the mind, there's matter. Dualism is the view that both things exist, and they're not just useful ways of talking. Like the mind is a separate, real kind of thing. Materialism is the view that this doesn't exist, at least not as a separate thing. Like, yeah, there are minds, but really they're just complicated pieces of matter.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, so. I mean, I agree. I know you're a very passionate materialist. I mean,
I don't know.
It's probably already apparent, but this is my view, and it's the most popular view now in philosophy. Idealism is the view that actually matter is what doesn't exist. There's just minds and their contents. So I mention this because this is a view that's out there, that there is no physical world. All there is consciousness and its
Matrix.
contents. Sort of like the, although in the Matrix it's still physical
They're
things.
still physical, but like minus the physical, like you're
Yes, minus the
in.
physical.
Minus the physical. You're
Yes.
like, your brain is there, but
Or not your brain, your mind.
sorry, your mind, yeah, because they're different.
So, this felt, I think we actually talked about this in the realism chapter. What I'm inclined to say is there's a physical marker here that I'm perceiving. If you're an idealist, like George Berkeley, for example, all that I really have access to is I'm having a green cylinder experience.
How do you know it's green?
So I know, I'm having a greenish experience now. What I don't have access to is that it's a separate physical thing that would be there even if I'm not looking at it. And of course, again, Berkeley brings God to the rescue with this view, because the question then is, well, what about when I'm not looking at the marker? And Berkeley says, well, God's looking at it.
Oh, yes.
So everything is an experience in God's mind if people aren't looking at it. Okay, last view, final view of the day, which is a dualist view. It's one that is still around, maybe more so than interactionist dualism, is epiphenomenalism. So here's the way this view works. So epiphenomenon, now epiphenomenon is defined in different ways. This should be in the key terms.
We did this already.
Have we done epiphenomenalism?
Yeah, we just did this at the beginning of class.
I'm quite sure we didn't, but we'll find
We
out.
did not.
No, we did not.
So, actually, I'll start by making a distinction. There are actually two senses of the term epiphenomenon, one of which you may have seen in other courses, but one which is more relevant here. In evolutionary biology, an epiphenomenon, or sometimes called a byproduct, is something that has no adaptive function. So, for example, the belly button is like the standard example in evolution of a byproduct. So the umbilical cord is an adaptation, right? It is selected for because of the adaptive benefits it has for the organism, right? An organism that failed to be able to produce an umbilical cord would have been less likely to spread its gene, obviously. As a side effect of having an umbilical cord, you get the belly button for free, right? It's not there to attract mates or gather food. It has no function. It's just a side effect. Now, philosophers took this idea and kind of turned it up to 11. When they speak of an epiphenomenon, they mean a side effect that has no effects at all. Not just no adaptive effects or no effects on survival or reproduction, but no effects at all. So here's the way it works. The physical stuff does all the causing. So, I mean, at this point you should know that, yeah, square means physical state. So, I touch the hot stove, that causes signals to go up here, I pull away, I walk away. All the causing is done by matter. They accept the idea that the physical universe is causally closed, right? There's no new effects introduced from the outside. But they still think, no, but the mind seems to be non-physical. It seems to be like an extra kind of thing. So they agree. Okay, the mental states, like feeling in pain, actually I won't call it mind, I'll just call it mental state. Those are produced by material states, but they do not in turn affect physical states. So the pain is this extra thing, this extra non-physical thing, but it does not cause you to retract your hand or to walk away or those other physical states. This is a very tempting solution to the mind-body problem, but it's extremely costly. Because what it means is mental states have no effect on your behavior, including your belief in epiphenomenalism, or at least your reported belief in epiphenomenalism. So, when I touch the hot stove and pull away, my pulling away is not because I'm in pain. Well, actually, in that case, that's true. Whatever. You hit me in the leg and I punch you back. My punching back is not caused by the pain. And also, my saying things like, wow, consciousness seems very mysterious. I don't know how it could be physical. That is not caused by my mental states. Because me saying things like that can't be affected by mental states. So the final video of the day is a little kind of debate between someone trying to play devil's advocate for epiphenomenalism and Dennett. So if that was a bit hard to follow, it's basically what I was saying earlier, that if you adopt this view, none of your behavior, none of your brain states can be an effect of consciousness, including you saying things like, gee, consciousness is very mysterious. I don't understand how, because that...
Because you're not conscious.
No, not because you're not conscious, but because conscious states have no effects on anything. They have no effects. The causing is all done by physical states. Now, there are some views that we'll see later where epiphenomenalism seems like a natural place to go, but I just want to flag that it's a very costly view.
Where would Freud fit into all these?
Oh, he would definitely not be. I think I would be inclined to say Freud's a materialist. I haven't reviewed Freud's work in detail, but I suspect he'd be some kind of materialist. Don't quote me on that, but that would be my opinion.
I'm just circling back to compatibilism and the idea of like believing in determinism, but also believing in free will. And I'm wondering if that means that you believe in free will in the same way that you believe in like seeing the color red, where it's like you can't help but to immerse yourself in the illusion of free will.
Mm-hmm.
But so like you're having a free will experience, but in reality, it's just how you are.
Yeah, many people, I think, will charge compatibilism with implying that. It wouldn't be how I would characterize it, but yes, what some people will say is, well, that's not real free will. Real free will is being able to decide in a way that's independent of prior causes. Whereas the compatibilist says, no, being able to do what you want, to deliberate and decide, is good enough. And those deliberations are themselves brain states. But who cares that they are predetermined? And then the anti-compatibilist says, no, that's not what people mean by free will. And then at that point, it becomes actually an empirical question. What do most people mean by free will? Now, we'll actually come back to this in the Dennett chapter, because Dennett is also a compatibilist. So maybe hold your fire. But no, it's a point that many people make. Okay. Any other questions about these chapters? Okay, I'll call it a day. Although you can return your fire now.
Yeah.
We can talk more about this.
Well, no, I was going to say that in terms of quantum, like quantum physics, are you